I apologize for the hiatus there between the video and my speaking. So I hope that you enjoyed listening to J.K. Rowling, even though you were interpreting her, which does take away some of the fun. She actually came to a surprising conclusion, the fact that you cannot succeed and you cannot grow without failing. And a lot of us spend our time, I think, trying to avoid failing, whereas we forget the lesson that all sports people have learned a long time ago, that failure is an essential part of success. So I want to try and help you to not only be better interpreters, but also to be happier people by understanding that you mustn't spend your life fleeing being broken, fleeing falling down on the job, fleeing failure, because it will do you the utmost good. And in fact, it is actually essential. Now, if I can get the things to change, here we are, right. There are 3 books I wanted to recommend to you, which you might want at some stage to look at. The one on the left is actually a book of theology, which is entitled, If You Want to Walk on Water, You've Got to Get Out of the Boat. But the principle is that if you don't take a risk and take the first step out of your comfort zone, you're never going to reach the stage where you can walk on water. And although most of you are pretty close to that stage already, I'm sure you want to be better and to be able to dance and run on the water rather than just walking. So go for it. The second book is the one in the middle, which you may have heard of. It's actually the seminal work in the sports psychological coaching business, which is called The Inner Game of Tennis. And it talks about the fact that when we perform, as you are doing now, as I am too, I suppose, there are 2 people performing. There's the person who actually does the work, which is the part of you that's interpreting, and then there's the person sitting on that person's shoulder and saying, you're no good, you got it wrong, you could have done that better, do something else. And what the book is saying, ignore the person inside you who is commenting on the performer. He paraphrases it in one phrase, which is get out of your own way. And good luck with interpreting that. The last book is the one on the right, which is one which I swear by, and I recommend you all to read it. It's very encouraging. It's called Talent is Overrated. And the thesis of Jeff Colvin in this book is that we think that to succeed brilliantly at anything, you have to have a God-given gift, like Mozart or Tiger Woods or someone like that. But he points out that all these people whom we admire, who are great giants in their respective disciplines, actually started when they were 2 or 3 years old, which means that what we see and admire is the fruit of thousands of hours of practice. And so this is encouraging in that it means we can all reach the summits just through hard work. It's 9/10 hard work, he says, and 1/10 natural gifting. So I think that's an encouragement to us, to those of us who are mere mortals, and we don't seem to have this, to have been touched by the gods at our birth. This is a formula which is employed by the Stoics, and the Stoics say, and this requires some thinking about actually, it's only 5 words, but it requires some heavy thinking, that the obstacle is the path. So the path is not where you walk around the obstacle or try and avoid the obstacle, or maybe get stuck in front of the obstacle. The obstacle itself is the path. So failure is not just an integral part of success, it is the essential part of success. And the principle behind the growth mindset I want to talk to you about tonight in the remaining 7 minutes is that we grow. We can have an attitude where we see failure and we see setbacks as something which is going to stop us growing, or we see these things as tools to help us learn and grow. So the magic growth suffix, which I called it that, that's my own terminology, is to add the word yet or the word today, if you're speaking English, to when you say, for example, I can't possibly interpret Chris, just say I can't possibly interpret Chris yet or today, which means implicitly that you can do it tomorrow. And if you add this to all your negative self-talk, which we indulge in far too much in the interpreting profession, we will be much more at ease with ourselves, and we'll stop beating ourselves up, and we'll progress and we'll become actually good interpreters. And I wanted to point out something which I say on the first day of the Cambridge course, that self-confidence as an interpreter, self-belief is absolutely essential. It's an essential tool in your toolbox to become great interpreters, just as much as learning consecutive notes or practicing simultaneous. You have to learn to believe in yourself, or you will never scale the heights. Henry Ford said the only real mistake is the one from which we learn nothing. So every time you fall short, every time you say, I could have done that much better, that didn't work out today, sit down and write down why it didn't work out and what you can learn from it to prevent the same happening the next time you go in the booth. Because if we learn nothing from our mistakes, there's no point in actually practicing anyway. This reminds me of when I used to be a traffic policeman, and I would turn up at the scene of an accident, and often in the winter, people would hit the brakes and they'd crash, right? And you talk to the motorist, and you say, well, madam, isn't necessarily a woman, madam or sir, what happened? And they say, well, the brakes didn't work. And so you get in the car and you test the brakes, and the brakes are perfect. The brakes worked fine, it's just that they couldn't brake because the road was slippery. And then they go away and they go back to the garage and get a replacement car while their car's being fixed. And the next day, if they were faced with exactly the same circumstances, they would do exactly the same thing, because they haven't called themselves into question. They haven't said, what could I have done differently to have a different outcome? So they wouldn't learn from their mistakes. And I hope you don't fall into that trap. This is a good picture of somebody who has fallen into that trap because he was dropped as a baby and spent his whole time lying on the floor, never getting up and walking. So to look properly at the idea of the growth mindset, it's important that you realize that our brains carry out three main sets of functions. We have the new brain, the mammalian brain, and the reptilian brain. I suppose I should have put these in the chat, shouldn't I? No, I can't think of it. Never mind. The new brain is a brain which we developed late in our existence as Homo sapiens. That's the one that does the processing. Enables you in the interpreting booth now to understand the argument. Not, of course, that I have an argument, but if I did have one, you'd understand it with your new brain. The mammalian brain, often called the base brain, deals with emotion. And to me, there's no way you can be a decent interpreter if you don't empathize and don't understand the importance of emotion. If you don't want to get inside the speaker's skin and are not able to do so. And the third part of your brain is the reptilian brain, which is the one that deals with the instincts. So when you withdraw your hand from the fire, not because you think, oh my God, that's hot, what should I do about it? Maybe I ought to move my hand, then it will stop burning. You just do it because the instinct goes straight from your nerve endings to your hand. And that's what we have to build up as interpreters. If you don't have, I would say that at least 2/3 of what you do in the booth ought to be the fruit of instinct and not processing. And then you build on that basis of instinct to do all the high level stuff, which is the really complicated empathy and processing. But you've got to build the instincts. This is an idea which is such that you use the stress which you feel when you're at work as an interpreter or anything else in life, and you use it not simply with a view to beating it, but with a view to actually living with it and enabling you to do more than you could without that stress, because it releases dopamine, adrenaline, cortisol in your system, and this enables you to do things you couldn't otherwise do, which is why I use a quotation from Macbeth, because I couldn't possibly speak, those of you who know me know this to be true, without quoting Shakespeare. And in Macbeth, Macduff, who was Macbeth's right-hand man, he leaves Scotland because he realizes what Macbeth is doing and he's going to become a bloody tyrant. But like an idiot, he leaves his family behind in Scotland. And so what does Macbeth do? He murders the entire family of Macduff and has his wife raped and the children cut into pieces and all the rest of it. So they bring Macduff the news of the demise of his family when he's in England raising an army to go back to Scotland to beat Macbeth. And he falls apart and he collapses on the ground and he starts sort of beating his chest and tearing out his hair and weeping because obviously all his loved ones are dead. And his friend, or in fact the ex-king's son, says to him, contest it like a man. He says, yes, but first I must feel it like a man. And then the king's son says to him, let this be the whetstone of your sword. So sharpen your sword on the grief, on the intensity of your grief, and then go back there in Scotland and use the sword to beat Macbeth. So I would say that applies to us in the booth. Let what you're feeling, the angst, the anguish, the nausea, the pain, the feeling of not being sufficient and strong enough, let it be the whetstone of your sword. Your sword, of course, being a combination of your brain and your mouth. I have about 1 minute left, so I will leave you with this thought here. Think about this one as well. Think about it carefully. Zig Ziglar, who is a famous thinker in the US, He says that failure is not a dead end street. So you may be thinking, I got failure, I get to failure, and I go no further. No, he's saying it's a detour. And what is characteristic of a detour? You have to go through the detour to get to where you want to go. There is no choice. And so what he's saying is failure is not optional. You have to fail, then you get up and you go and do it again. In fact, I have to leave you one last quote, this one here, which I'm very keen on because I'm a great fan of Game of Thrones. Jon Snow says to Sir Davos Seaworth, I failed. And Sir Davos says, good, now go and fail again. So I hope this has encouraged you all. I'm sure my speech didn't, but at least what I said might have. Thank you very much for listening. Take care.